Okay. So this year we're going to talk about emotional maturity again. We talked about this last year, and we had a lot of feedback from that talk. So apparently that was like a needed thing. And we were asked to talk about it again this year. So this year we are going to come at it from more of an angle of like conflict resolution and communication skills, because I do think 90% of leadership is good communication. And I honestly think 90% of any relationship is good communication, whether it's marriage or parenting or leading your team. Like, a lot of it is good communication.
And the problem begins when we think that to have a great relationship, there cannot ever be disagreement or conflict or problems. And the truth of the matter is, if you hope to have any successful relationship, you're going to have to expect and accept that there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be confrontation, there's going to be conflict, but you can build solid relationships if you will just lean into that process in a way that is mature.
Yeah, and long-term relationships. Anybody here want a long-term relationship? Like, I want deep relationships that last. They matter. And conflict is inevitable because you're dealing with human beings. Doesn't matter how good a person is. Like, it doesn't matter how good I am. Like, if you hang around long enough, I promise you, I'm going to disappoint you. At some point, I might even hurt you, probably not intentionally, but conflict is just a part of the human condition. And so if you can learn how to manage it well, then you can have long-term, deeply satisfying relationships all the way around. And if you don't learn this skill, then what's the result of it?
If you don't learn this skill, you're going to find yourself in just relationships that are superficial and ones that you can easily flip from one to the next, to the next, to the next. So you might have a lot of people that you know, but you're not ever actually truly known. Because in order to be truly known, you're going to have to be willing to be vulnerable with people. And a lot of conflict resolution is just being willing to be vulnerable, be humble, and be like, hey, you know what? That was my bad. Like, I totally didn't intend that to go this way, but I can see how it could have been received that way, and I'm going to take ownership of that.
Yeah, and if you don't have good communication skills, you're going to cause damage in your relationships. And conflict resolution, if you don't have those skills, they're also going to cause damage or can even receive damage. So as leaders, especially, we need these skills because you're going to have situations on your team. You could have might have to resolve a conflict between two of your level ones. Like, it's just inevitable. It's just part of life. And you're going to have, as you work with people, like, you're going to disagree on how things should be done, or like, what was, this wasn't really how I envisioned that, or whatever. Like, sometimes some personalities may seem to be more abrasive, and some may seem to be too crybaby-ish. And you're going to have to learn to work well with people. And this is just a huge part of it.
And so what we want to do is equip you to know how to handle those things, because something that's just as bad as handling conflict poorly is refusing to handle it at all. Some of you want to avoid the tough conversations that need to be had because in your upbringing or in your past, confrontation always means a fight. It always means an end of a relationship or whatever. And that's just not necessarily true. So we want you to be equipped to know how to handle these conversations confidently, so that you will lean in. You probably won't be great at it the first time, but that's okay. If you will lean into these kind of conversations, what it will do is it will deepen the relationship. It will create trust within the people involved, and it will allow you an opportunity to move forward. And that's what you're looking for when it comes to conflict, is just an opportunity to try again the next time. Sometimes we get so concerned about conflict that we just cut off the potential for there ever to be a next time. And what we want is just there to be resolution so there can be a next time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another thing to keep in mind is nobody does communication perfectly. Like, you're never going to arrive. You're never going to fully arrive. You just have to be willing to fail forward. Okay. You just have to be willing to do it. Okay. Emotionally mature people understand that conflict with people is inevitable, and they're able to, number one, express disagreement without becoming angry, without insulting anyone, without becoming disrespectful. Number two, they're able to not fly off the handle when they're angry and say intentionally hurtful things. And number three, not go to another person to vent or even to process or even ask for prayer when they're hurt, right? Because this leads to the drama triangle. So you should, is there a drama
There
triangle?
is a
Okay.
drama
You
triangle.
have a drama triangle in your book. If you want to flip there, go ahead. Remember this from last year? We're going to go over this again because this is just so common and so important that it's worth reminding ourselves of this every single year. So we can all be any one of these sides of the triangle at any given time. And it starts with someone getting hurt by someone else. The person who gets hurt is the victim. The person who caused the hurt is the perpetrator. The victim runs to the rescuer for emotional support and validation. The rescuer listens and validates all the feelings. The victim remains the victim until the rescuer eventually, because like I said, hang around long enough, you're going to disappoint somebody. Eventually, the rescuer becomes the perpetrator. And then the old perpetrator becomes the new rescuer. But the victim is still the victim. So how to stop the drama triangle? Well, if you're the perpetrator, you just apologize. If you were in the wrong, then you take ownership. Okay, don't blame somebody. Don't make excuses for your behavior. You just apologize. A sincere apology sounds like, I'm so sorry. If it sounds like this, I'm so sorry, but that's not a sincere apology. Okay, you should never blame someone else for your actions, even if you in any conflict. It's always, you know, it takes two to tango. Okay, usually, sometimes it's all one person that was wrong, but usually it's two people that are wrong. And even if one of them was 90% wrong, the other person was only 10% wrong, you should take 100% ownership of your 10% wrong. Okay, so a true apology does not make excuses or say, well, I'm sorry I did that, but because you blah, 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 then that caused me to, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I was wrong. Okay, so that's what you should do as a perpetrator. You want to add anything to that? Okay. If you are the rescuer, become the coach instead. Don't allow the victim to remain the victim. Tell the person to go to the source and communicate their hurt. Like you should, and here's another thing too, red flag. If a lot of people are coming to you to be the rescuer, that should communicate something to you about like you should like take a step back and think about that. Why do people come to me for that? Like people do want to feel validated and heard and cared about, but you shouldn't constantly feel like you're in that rescuer mode. And you also shouldn't listen to someone else's problems. You definitely should encourage them go to the source. Like it's not right for the victim to come to you if they haven't already gone to the source to communicate the problem. So don't get in the pool with them. It's possible to listen, if you must listen, without making this person's problem yours to solve. If you are the victim, become the problem solver instead. Take ownership, go to the source, not anybody else. You don't need a rescuer. You just need to communicate to the person that caused the problem. That's biblical communication, and you communicate your needs and have healthy boundaries. All right, so that's the drama triangle, just to refresh on that. 3 reasons for conflict. I actually heard this from Michelle the other day, but because she had learned it from somebody super smart, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. 3 reasons for conflict. Sometimes there's conflict because somebody actually wronged you. Like they legitimately sinned against you. Okay. So let's just say they gossiped about you, or they were blatantly disrespectful to you, or something like that. They actually did something wrong for you to be hurt over. But another reason for conflict is just different preferences. Like sometimes it could be like, somebody made a graphic and the other person really hates the way the graphic looks. You know, it's just like, it's just a matter of preference. Like it's not right or wrong. It's just preference. Like if it's your husband, he might want it cold in the vehicle and you might want it warm, you know? And then another reason for conflict is unmet expectations. So like you said you would do this, and then the person's like, well, I intended to do that. I'm going to do it this time. You didn't tell me you needed it by that time. So it was just unmet expectations that weren't clearly communicated. Like the person didn't know that there were certain expectations. All right, so that's 3 reasons for conflict. And I think that's important to understand in your communication because it will affect how you communicate. Like if it's a matter of preference, you should not feel hurt. Like if somebody has a different preference than you, that's not like appropriate to feel hurt over that. Okay, so that's what I mean. Okay, now what we really want to talk about though, the fun part is passive aggressiveness and how that's not good communication.
It is not good, but it is common.
Yes, very.
And what is so funny about this is many of you may struggle with this, but your first thought is going to be, I am not passive aggressive. I am not. Just listen up. I mean, look, we all struggle with it. We studied this last week and we're like, uh-oh. Oh, snap. Like this particular trait of passive aggressiveness, I think this is me. And she'll be like, I think I see this come up in me. And I'm like, I can see that.
Yeah, I do realize that. I mean, I think everybody's guilty of this. In my defense, I'm normal. Okay. So some examples of passive aggressive behavior. The first one is resistance to cooperation.
Let's define it first.
Oh, yes. Definition of passive aggression. Pattern of indirectly expressing negative feelings instead of expressing them directly. So that's the definition.
You're trying to communicate something, but instead of being clear on the hurt feelings, you are making a sideways comment, a snide remark, something kind of off the cuff versus saying, I felt hurt by this.
And the reason why, like the root of the behavior, passive aggressiveness happens when we don't get what we want or we don't get what we need, and we feel powerless to change or influence the situation. That is when we act passive aggressive. When we don't get what we want. Okay. Okay. Some examples. Number one, resistance to cooperation. What you guys about that?
That looks like being involved with something like planning an event during a regularly scheduled team call or book club night. Taking part in someone else's group coaching and not being a part of what's provided by your own team and upline. It looks like intentionally doing something that overlaps what you know is the expected behavior.
Yeah, or it could look like doing your IPA during the team call.
Guilty. Not anymore. Not anymore. But there was a time where she had to say, hey, I noticed on team call, I just like your part was really nice. I saw that the whole time. Had you fallen asleep? Help me understand. And I would say, I was so bit like I had to get my IPA in. And so she cared more about my growth than my feelings. This goes back to this morning. And instead of saying, well, good job getting your IPA in, she was like, okay, well, let me tell you what that looks like to your team. So anyways, that's just FYI.
Yeah.
But she wasn't passive aggressive about it.
Right. Definitely communicate. And I didn't want to say, well, I'll come back to that. Okay. So number two, passive aggressive behavior, cynical or hostile attitude. So that would look like being jealous of someone else's success. When somebody earns a prize, Christina says that she gets comments along the lines of, well, of course she's up there. There's Christina over there in the gym again. Of course she's at the gym. When really the root of it is like, you don't have what you want. You actually want what they have. And so you just try to make yourself feel better by downplaying someone else.
Or it looks like, of course she won that prize. She stays at home with her kids all day. Or of course she won that prize. She gets to go to work away from her kids all day. Like we are justifying someone else's results when really we just feel frustrated that we don't have the results yet. Of course, Christina has abs. She like only eats 12 times a whole year and she goes to the gym 5 times a week. Like you're hating on the fact that I work out, but what you're telling me is that you actually want to work out. So it's just sideways communication.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. Another example of passive aggressive behavior. Frequently complains about feeling underappreciated or cheated. Example, I should be further along by now. Or looking for downfalls of your sponsor, such as my upline didn't message me to tell me I did a good job.
Or we're on a trip somewhere, my upline didn't make it a priority to seek me out. That's passive aggressive.
Yeah.
It's passive aggressive and it's unrealistic. It's not their job to seek you out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. So those are some examples of passive aggressive behavior. So let's talk about conflict resolution. Like how do you actually do it? Well, we've already mentioned the most important thing is that you go to the source. You go to the person who's offended you or that you have a disagreement with. You don't ever, ever go to other people. And also, when you do go to the source, you do it one-on-one. The goal is restoration, right? It's not humiliation ever. So you want to do it one-on-one. You don't want to make a person feel vulnerable in front of somebody else. I mean, who likes to be told that they're wrong? Who likes to be told that they hurt somebody? Obviously, that's not something that you want to be told at all, much less be told in front of another person.
And that looks like even making a joke about it in a group before you've actually communicated one-on-one. We can joke about ourselves now all the time, but she would never put on blast something we had not already rectified ourselves personally. Does that make sense? So even a joke in comment like, oh, there Christina goes talking too much again. Like, if that had not ever been something we had talked about privately, she certainly wouldn't make it the butt of a joke in a group.
Yeah, and that is another form of passive aggression, is when you're making someone else the butt of a joke and it's at their expense. Like, you're not really laughing with them, you know? That's definitely passive aggressive. Okay. So that is, go to the source. That's the biblical model, Matthew 18:15. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. Literally straight out of the Bible. Okay. Number 2, never assume someone else's intentions. And I think oftentimes this is where we go wrong, because we judge other people based off of their actions and we judge ourselves based off of our intentions, right? But we assume that somebody's actions has a certain intent behind it. And that's always a dangerous thing. So the way I would communicate that is here's an example. I've noticed that, well, here's one thing. When you are assuming somebody else's intent, let's just say somebody's not responding to your messages and you want to communicate. Here's one way you could do it. You could say, I've noticed that you haven't been responding to my messages. Is there something wrong? You're not necessarily assuming their intent, but you are assuming something's wrong, right? See the assumption there? A better way to communicate the same thing would be, I noticed you haven't been responding to my messages. And the story that I'm telling myself is that you're mad about something. And I realize that's just my interpretation, and that may not even have anything to do with anything. So what is actually going on? That's a better way to communicate something without putting pressure on them or like they don't have to feel like they got to defend themselves. Yeah. All right. And then if somebody hurts you, I think you give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, you just assume that their intention was not to hurt you. And even though it may be perceived that way, assume that it wasn't. And this also applies to your marriage, your children, and your team.
I think when people say it, Christina, how do you say so even keel all the time? I'm decently good at number 3. I don't knee jerk usually to circumstances. Oh. I don't knee jerk to what?
I didn't realize you were moving to the next one. Sorry. Go ahead.
Or not.
I thought you were still talking about. 2. No, we was on number 2. But you go. That's fine. Go ahead. We were done there. I just didn't realize you were transitioning.
You literally said the word knee jerk, which is number 3.
I didn't say knee jerk.
Did she say knee jerk?
I did not say
Toba. I'm gonna say something aggressive about you later.
No, listen, just understand, I'm right.
Since that was communicated directly, I'm gonna receive that. I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me for moving on the Okay. Number 3, I'm good at. Don't knee jerk to your emotions. Just because you feel it does not make it fact. Just because you feel it doesn't make it fact. Take some time to think it through. And Brittany is a genius at this. She'll say something and then she'll be like, hold on, am I even entitled to feel this way? Just because it feels does not mean you're entitled to that feeling, or that it's someone else's responsibility to deal with it.
So, or it could be like, for me, it's not like, am I entitled to feel this way? It's like, is it right for me to feel this way? That's what I want to ask myself, because I realize I'm a fallen creature. You know, like, what if I feel jealous? Like, what if the emotion is jealousy? That's not something that I'm going to like go and try to communicate directly to the source. It's not their problem, it's mine. And so I do want to process through, like, well, why did that bother me? Like, what's the root of that? Is it jealousy, or is it XYZ? Is this the right way that I should feel? That is what I want to take a minute to like think through.
And I just always consider that there could be an alternative perspective. If I feel hurt, my first instinct is to not let them off the hook, but to assume their best intention. Like, man, I was left out of that birthday party. That feels weird. Wonder why. I would have invited them to my party. I'm going to assume they had a limited number of guests that they could invite, and it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't mean anything about us or our friendship. I could just choose to believe it had nothing to do with me personally.
Yeah, and a good Plexus example of that is like this. I have felt this way personally at times, and I know that probably a lot of you have too. But like being left out of a picture, like a group of people team up for a picture or whatever, and you're standing right there and nobody sees you. Like it happened in Mexico last year, actually. And I'm supposed to like,
yeah, I just said put most of the blame on me.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna give you a real life example of this. So
one of many to come.
Yeah, and I'm just every time we're trying to think of examples of this, I'm like, oh, do you want to like find a instance where like I was the perpetrator?
What she said is like always
like I can't wrong. Can't think of any times you've offended me. All right, so I'm kidding,
but she's not really.
Like every time there's an object lesson, she is the object.
She's like, I'm so giddy for today's training. I'm like, I bet you are. I am the butt of all of the problems.
Okay, so we were in Mexico last year. We're in Mexico, and they gave us Tiffany's gift cards. And so it's like a beautiful display, and like you go, it's really, really photogenic, and just you want to take lots of pictures. So you go get your gift card, and you come out, and you find your friends, and take pictures with your Tiffany's gift card. So Christina and I are standing in line together. We get our gift cards, and because she's so popular, she got stopped. And I made it back to the table before she did. Did y'all sense that passive aggressive? Anyway, so I get to the table and I'm standing there by myself. Well, then Emily walks up with her Tiffany's gift card, and then Christina walks up with her Tiffany's gift card, looks right through me.
Right. Never saw her.
Looked right through me.
Did not see her.
Looked right.
We were in matching dresses. I wasn't trying to avoid you.
And it was like, and I'm literally behind them. And I'm just like,
I had no idea.
Like, y'all are both my level ones. Like, hello.
No, it went on for like 10 minutes of us taking pictures. And yeah, I look back and there she is. Yeah, I'm like, oh no. Oh no, this ain't gonna go well.
Okay, so I will be honest, it hurt my feelings.
And I was still totally unaware.
It did hurt my feelings though, because I was just like, well, why didn't they invite? I literally standing right there, like, why didn't they invite me? I'm telling you, I'm human. Okay. So but I did communicate. I don't remember if I communicated.
That's why I had a black eye. Okay. That's why I had a black eye and so much makeup on the next day.
Okay. So I just said, like, that really hurt my feelings. I was standing, like, we went and got our gift cards together. Like, then we got separated, and then you asked her to take the picture, not me. Like, now that's going to be all over social media, and it looks like I'm just shot liver. Like, I don't matter to
exactly what my people would think.
Like, I'm not the top recruiter. I'm not like the top anything. And like, I'm underrecognized, underappreciated, and you don't even want to take a picture with me, and I'm hurt. So
she didn't say all that, but she did say,
I'm being,
that hurt my feelings. I felt overlooked.
Yeah, I did. It did hurt me. I just felt left out.
And I said, get over it.
But anyway, but before I communicated, I did assume she had good intentions, but I paused before I communicated because I wanted to know, like, is this legitimate? And so, like, I think I waited probably a few hours. It might have even been the next day. And I was just like, it is still bothering me. So obviously I need to communicate it, because if it's bothering me and I don't communicate it, what's going to happen is it's going to come out passive aggressively. That's what's going to happen.
So instead it came out like this. Hey, I need to talk to you about something. Anybody have somebody when they say that, you're like, and listen, if I have done this many times, I'm like, oh no, what I do? I'm already guilty. I already take ownership. Can you forgive me? I don't even know what I did yet.
All right. So the point is, don't knee-jerk react to your emotions. Just because you feel something, it doesn't make it necessarily true. So Christina's response was, oh my gosh, I didn't even see it. Why didn't you just jump in? She thought it was utterly ridiculous that I would stand there and get my feelings hurt over that instead of just jumping in the picture. Like nobody minds. I'm over here telling myself like they must just like want their own picture, like with me in it. They're better friends than me, huh? All right. Anyways, don't believe your own narrative.
Here's what she
Don't
did.
believe your own thoughts.
She didn't march off and go to her room and sulk. She didn't go to somebody else and say, Michelle, you're not going to believe what Emily and Christina just did. Like, can you believe they would leave me out? How thoughtless.
Yeah.
She didn't do that. She didn't go say, hey, can you give me some advice? She didn't do that. She just waited and then said, hey, this happened. I felt this way. I'm sure you didn't mean anything by it. Can you just help me understand what happened?
Yes. All right. So the next point is at the same time, before, like, we don't want you to knee jerk to your reaction. I mean, to your emotions. We do want you to take time to think it through and consider if possibly there are alternative perspectives, but you don't want to wait too long to communicate because then things build up. And that's when, like I said, that's when the passive aggressive behavior comes out. And we're going to give you an example of that.
I hope we run out of time.
We're not running out of time. No, we getting it in, girl. We can cut out everything else. We getting it in. All right. Then next thing, communicate clearly and calmly and respectfully without throwing insults. With name calling is never okay, and without using superlatives. Like, did you know that if you say you always or you never, then it's probably not true. Okay, so don't use words like you always or you never. Don't do that. All right, here's a good phrase. You need to write this down and memorize it. When you did blank, or when you said blank, it made me feel blank. Can you help me understand what you meant by that? I know that you didn't intend to make me feel that way. Can you help me understand like what that actually means?
Yep, and throwing that sentence in of, I know you didn't intend for me to feel that way. What that does is it immediately defuses the situation. It immediately makes them go from a defensive posture to an offensive posture. Like, oh, okay, she knows I didn't intend that. So now I can take a teachable time to show her what I did intend.
Yeah, most of the time when you communicate that way, the person's gonna be like, oh my gosh, no, I didn't mean that at all. What I meant was blah, blah. And it's just resolved like quickly and there's no drama around it. All right, when dealing with, this is important too. If you, as a leader, if someone is behaving passively aggressively toward you, and you got to figure out how to respond to that, just know that not everybody feels comfortable discussing and being open with like their innermost thoughts and feelings, especially in front of other people. But even if it's just one-on-one, not everyone's going to feel super comfortable being vulnerable. So if you can focus on like the underlying concern, rather than the way that person is expressing themselves, you can address the actual problem. I feel like Fallon is really good at this one. Because when somebody acts passively aggressively toward me, I'd be like, I'm ready to fight. But Fallon just will like overlook the disrespect and she'll be like, well, what they actually are feeling is this. And so she's really good at giving grace in this area. So shout out to Fallon for not cutting nobody. Okay. Here's some phrases that are helpful. When you are dealing with passive aggressive behavior. I get the sense that you're not fully on board with this. What else do we need to talk about? So this one line fosters so much cooperation because you're going to the person and you're saying like, it's obvious we're not, like, I care about your feelings. I also care about your opinion. I value your input and I want unity. What else do we need to discuss? Here's another phrase. The way we ended that conversation the other day, I got the feeling that we're not totally on the same page. What else can we discuss? What else needs to be discussed? Talk about. Anything to add on that? Okay. Okay. We've already touched on this one. If you've made a mistake or if you are the offender, make sure you apologize sincerely. And just understand that there's going to be times for some of us more than others where you have to apologize. And failure is just part of the process. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have to, we're all the perpetrator at some point. We're all going to have to apologize and and ask for forgiveness at some point. So expect that. When is the last time you apologized? That's a good question for self-reflection. Okay, so don't include excuses with your apology, just be sincere. Take ownership, even if your part was only small. Okay. And then when somebody apologizes to you, you need to be willing to forgive. And sometimes the hurt is so deep that you're not ready to forgive like as soon as they apologize. And that's okay. And in those instances, you say this part, you said it so good the other day.
Well, if somebody's asking for genuine forgiveness and you're just not there yet, communicate that you're actively working toward that. You express your need for continued space and understanding, but let them know like their work here is done. They've asked for the forgiveness. It's now on you. It's not something that has to hang over their head. Let them know I'm actively working to get there. I will get there and I'm actively working on it. Thank you for your apology. I'm working on it.
Yeah, like just need some space to think about it,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna get, yeah, so good. Okay.
It's gonna keep somebody who has a personality like me of feeling like there's a potential for abandonment or ending of the relationship. Like if I know they're actively working, then they're not gonna actively work on something they don't intend to continue working on. Like they're not gonna pursue resolution for a relationship they're okay ending. So it just solidifies that like when you're in this, it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. And understand that because conflict will always be an inevitable part of any relationship, if you have them, it's not a sign that your relationship is not good. I would say a sign that your relationship is not good is when conflict never happens because good communication is not happening. Like if conflict never happens, what's likely happening is you're burying things and you're not communicating.
Or it's a surface relationship, no depth.
Yeah. Yeah. So
At a time.
what? Christina's like, well, we gotta go. All right, we're gonna give you a real life example of conflict resolution. So here's the thing. Christina and I have a great relationship. Like really, we love each other deeply, like sisters. And and what we portray, like what we put out there on social media, or like what you see when we're together, like we really do love each other, and it is very sincere. But there are times where we disagree. And one time we're about to share with you was when we were in Portugal. We earned the top 50 trip for last year. What's that sign mean, Christina?
Means I should have
Means
put something
guilt.
else in that drink. Sweating.
All right. So, okay. So I took my daughter Grace, she's 11, and Christina brought her husband.
He's also 11.
Okay, you ain't wrong. Okay. So we're in Portugal, in Europe, on this luxurious trip with the top 50 earners in the company, or the top 50 achievers. So I'm over here like, learn from all the achievers, and Christina's over here like, party with all the achievers. And so we just had different expectations, okay? So it started with different expectations, but it actually by the end of the week turned into some legitimate hurt, because how I felt was that Christina was insensitive to my personal needs to have conversations with certain people. Like she knew, I felt like she should have known that this was a need. Like she's my best friend. Like I tell her everything. I'm very vulnerable with her. Like we have very, very different personalities, but I just felt like I was telling myself she should have known this. And so when these situations would come up, then I felt hurt. Like I felt like it felt like she didn't care, felt like she was being insensitive. But it was like I'd be trying to have conversations with people and she'd be interrupting, she'd be dominating a conversation. Like when she would be talking to somebody, it would be like not asking questions, just kind of self-interest, like self-focus. And also I just felt like it was insensitive because I felt like she should have known that me as an introvert, and just like what my needs were personally at the time, that I needed to be able to talk to other people who like would understand, other achievers, or even people like who were a step ahead of me. That was really important to me. I always loved to have good conversations with people that I can learn from. And so the week went on, and on. Yeah, but so it happened like every day. But so I'm trying to I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying to like assume that she's got great intent. I'm trying to do all the things right. And meanwhile, it's like building, like it built up. And what actually happened was the last evening we had this super bougie dinner at like this really nice, immaculate place that I can't even describe. And we had this really nice multi-course dinner
that we didn't eat.
And we ended up having a discussion about it while we were talking, and I was trying to communicate, and then it got kind of passionate, like real passionate in the middle of dinner.
The
And
most
like,
passionate we've ever been.
Yeah, probably the biggest disagreement or discussion or conflict that we have ever had. And so anyways, but I did feel like it was necessary to communicate, because by that point I was like, okay, I do think that like what I'm feeling is valid. And also if I don't say something, then she's going to keep doing it, and then I'm going to keep getting hurt, or she's going to feel embarrassed like when she realizes how she's acting. So, okay, I got to communicate. But then she felt hurt. Like when I did communicate it, she felt hurt.
So I felt hurt because she had picked up on something days before. And I felt like she allowed me to walk around with my skirt tucked into my underwear. And I felt like if anybody ought to have loved me enough to pull the skirt out, it should have been her. And instead, she allowed me to have behavior that was not becoming. And instead of just saying, hey, you might want to get this in check, I don't know if I'm actually justified or not, but I'm gonna jump the gun on this one to save you embarrassment or humiliation or whatever. She let that continue until the last night, where I mean, it was hours. We sat there and went at it for hours.
And when she says went at it, what it actually
here's what my 6'4", 250-pound husband kept doing. Okay. Oh. Brittany, are you do you need are you gonna touch?
But he was the only one who noticed.
He picked up on it. No, I don't know. Did y'all know, April?
No, Jamie? Had no clue.
No,
so everybody in the room,
they thought we were saving the world.
They probably thought, oh, they're just being their intense selves. They're just over there strategizing. I bet whatever they're saying is really good. Meanwhile, guess who's sitting behind us? Tall Robinson and his wife, literally right behind us, and we are just like this, like. Like we are intense and like getting closer, you know. So I mean, we're definitely under control, but it was a passionate discussion because we both felt very hurt during this conversation. Mm-hmm. And it was like everybody, April was at our table, literally at our table. So, but we weren't like acting out, like it was not disrespectful, none of that. That's what I'm saying. Like nobody knew, even though it like they should have.
It was the most emotionally charged conversation I've ever been a part of, ever. And it required humility, it required vulnerability, it required assertiveness, because I could have just not expressed my heart. I mean, when she pointed out the behavior, I'm like, oh, I mean, total ownership. And I avoid confrontation normally, but in that moment, I'm like, you know what? Listen, everything that you're saying is valid. However, let me tell you how this makes me feel right now. You could have saved me you could have saved me from that had you just told me earlier. And so then she had to explain why she hadn't told me earlier. And then I had to tell, I mean, it just was back and forth. Nobody getting defensive necessarily, but just continuing to go layer after layer. And that is painful. It's extremely painful.
But do you see why your job is not just cheerleading? Like I could have cheered Christina. I mean, she's on the top 50 trip. Christina's freaking amazing. Okay, there's a lot I could cheer her on about. I mean, she's on this trip for the top achievers in the company. But she's getting hurt with me, like legitimately hurt, because I didn't tell her. Like she's saying she felt like she had her skirt, tucked in her panties, and I didn't say anything because she intuitively knows that my role as leader is not just cheerleading her, right? She wants to grow. Her goal is results. Her goal is influence. And so as a leader, I do have responsibility to cultivate that. Okay, so that was just a real life example of how we both felt hurt, but we both also communicated, and then what we learned from it. Because like, how does this apply to the drama triangle? Like, what if all week long I didn't, well, let's just say I went and told somebody, what if I went to Jamie? Jamie was there. Jamie's my sideline. What if I went to a sideline and started being like, listen, if you were in a situation, would you feel like this? Like I could have went and sought out validation. Like I could have done that. And honestly, I could have justified it because I didn't know in my mind. In my mind, I'm thinking, am I anything? Like I know I'm sensitive. Like I definitely can be prone to getting my feelings hurt, like easier than some people. But so I'm just like trying to process, like, should I even give something? Like I just don't know. But so I mean, I easily could have justified going to a sideline and getting my emotional needs validated, right? But I did not do that. And so Jamie had no clue. Neither did April, who was at our table. Okay. And then what was the fruit of it? I think that's important to understand because if we hadn't communicated, then it would have led to bitterness. It would have led to passive aggressiveness, obviously. It would have led to like division in our friendship, like kind of maybe some separation or some pulling back. Like there would have been some damage done if we had chosen not to communicate the hard things.
Not only that, but going forward, I would have been operating the same way that I had been operating. She would have continued operating the same way. I mean, we both have learned lessons that have played out in the future. Like I've been at other trips and I will be so intentional to be so careful because she just brought awareness. And there have been times that things have come up and she'll say, listen, I was going to sit on this a little bit longer, but I didn't want to, because the issue was not just how long she sat on it, but when it finally came out, she had so many examples of a lot of ammo. So I'm like, next time, just bring the one example. Let's just start with the one. If you're like, let's not wait for a list of 12, just bring me one. And so now she'll say, hey, I was going to chew on this a second, but you told me to tell you, so what did you mean by this the other day? And we can handle it right then versus it having to be 12 offenses later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is the fruit for me would be just learning to I think learning to trust myself a little more. Because I do have a tendency to like not trust myself. Like I will second guess every thought I have or every emotion I have or everything I think. Like I don't just naturally assume that I'm right. I go back and forth in my mind about everything all of the time. And so I've learned to trust my intuition a little more and then just communicate sooner because I am such an intentional person. Like I think through things so deeply. And I think this is why this is personality differences here. So this will be a matter of preference, just so you know. But my personality is like I think before I make a decision and take action. And Christina is rapid fire. Because she's rapid fire, she gets a lot more done, but she's not as like thorough or like she's just prone to fall down a little bit more just because she's taking more action. And so that's not good or bad. That's just a matter of how God has wired both of us. And so for me, the fruit of that was learning to trust myself a little bit sooner and then communicating. Like if I notice myself becoming like bitter or that passive aggressive now that I'm aware of like what examples of passive aggressive behavior can be, like different forms of it. If I'm noticing that, just acting on it sooner.
And be somebody that can have these things communicated to.
Yeah.
If every single time she had to come to me with something that was hurtful or something that was out of place or whatever, and it was going to be this big, dramatic, emotional fallout, what would happen eventually is she would just stop telling me. It would become not worth it. So if every time your upline's trying to communicate and you are throwing a hissy fit, just know eventually they'll go find someone to communicate who can handle the harder things easier.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily a hissy fit. It could just be like an emotional spiral. Like if I'm a leader and I gotta tell you a hard thing to help you grow, and the way you respond, like I gotta deal with the aftermath of that. Like I gotta work through a whole bunch of stuff just to tell you the thing that's gonna help you grow. I definitely would hesitate. Yes, that's gonna be like double the work. I'm gonna think twice before I give any constructive feedback. So what was the fruit of this for you? Like how have you changed your behavior and become more aware, like, since that?
I just don't travel with you anymore. Kidding. Well, we recognize, we drill down to a lot of some mindset stuff, some personality stuff, some insecurity stuff. I think sometimes when you see leaders at this level, you think they have it all figured out. And listen, all the same junk you're carrying, you're still going to be carrying it, just going to be at a higher level. Just going to come with more responsibility, more pressure. And so, I mean, she would just say, I don't understand why you're not asking questions. Like, I want to ask Tamara Holloway something. I want to ask Heffley something. Like, why, when you get a chance to talk to them, you talk about things that don't matter? Why? And I'm like, probably because it comes from an insecurity. Comes from this, somehow I'm going to appear worthless. I'm going to appear like I'm at the table that I don't, I'm at the adult table. I'm really supposed to be at the kid table, but no one's noticed. So let me just act like an adult, but not really have to talk about adult things. So just came from just awareness, number one. And then she equipped me like, okay, listen, I'm going to the next Jewel school. What are some things that I can ask the trainers that are ahead of me? And so she helped me feel equipped so that I could sit at the adult table and have the adult conversations, which I know sounds ridiculous, but just awareness. I'm so much more intentional now to ask any questions about anybody's growth, their story, their this, their that, before I ever offer mine. Because I think before that was the easiest thing to talk about. Like, okay, well, they think I'm great. Let me just stay right there. Let's just stay right there so that I don't appear vulnerable or whatever. So awareness, just something as simple as not interrupting. Listen, I have been working on not interrupting for my whole life.
That's one thing you gotta read. We found out that earlier, say the same thing 10 different ways.
My whole life.
And
We'll make progress. And then again, she has helped me notice certain triggers, like some things that will make me more apt to interrupt, like martinis. So I'm just aware, like the fifth martini equal interrupting. So I just don't have the fifth. Remember the Act Right video? If the second drink makes you twerk, that fifth martini made me interrupt. So.
All right, and yes, and she totally I have literally seen the growth in this area. Like, we've been on many trips since then. I mean, a lot of them. And every time she'll come back and she'll be like, listen what I learned from this person. Listen what I learned from that person. She was very intentional at convention, very intentional at the next Jewel school she was at, very intentional at Hawaii. And I'm sure she's going to be very intentional, like, going forward. So it was very fruitful. It was also very painful, and we were willing. So that's the point. You're just going to have to be willing to say the hard things because you love the person. Like, if you don't care, then you're not going to be willing to, like, put in the work. It's work, y'all. It's work. It's hard. But if you do care, for the sake of the relationship, you're just going to have to communicate. Okay. So I think that's it.
Okay.